So it's been a couple of weeks since Charlie Kirk died, and every Democratic leader rushed to Twitter essentially saying the same thing. They called it a tragedy, that he didn't deserve to die, and that political violence is never the answer. There's also this idea that conservatives are floating around that this guy was killed for just having a difference of opinion, and that he did things the right way, and all he was doing was just talking. I'm going to tell you right now, no, he was not just talking. I know he really loved repeating this little gem right here. Words aren't violence. Violence is violence. But this is intellectually dishonest, which is par for the course. This is his brand, and he's not alone in this. Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson, they're just different brand names to the same product. Each day these guys speak, they are able to instill hatred in people's hearts. Hatred leads to action, but it can also lead to the support of the most heinously written laws. So here's the thing about political violence. Most political violence is systemic. The fact that a person's rights are affected by their zip code is a form of political violence. To have fewer rights because of the state you were born in is a legislated oppression allowed by our system. If you condemn political violence, then you have to condemn systemic injustice as well. Political violence is a legislated hardship that causes the deaths of marginalized people in our nation, and it has escalated to normalized physical violence in the form of police brutality during protests and ICE raids. And that's because conservatives have found a way to get their base to grant them the permission to enact political violence guilt-free. Because this is a type of violence they don't have to see. So when someone gets upset by these unjust laws, they get looked down on for not being civil. After all, these podcasters talk so calmly. But the problem is we often conflate being civil with being calm. It doesn't matter how calm or rational you sound. If your words sow the seeds of violence against people just living their lives, your words are not civil. They are an instrument of harm. They are a form of violence. After 9/11 happened and the war on terror was announced, people started looking at Arabs differently. Instead of directing the actions towards the individuals responsible for the crime, an entire ethnic group was treated as hostile outsiders. Sounds familiar, right? That's this whole administration, where everyone different is somehow simultaneously mooching off our system and stealing all our jobs. But also they're murderers and drug dealers? Does that sound civil to you? Even Kirk himself was offended when, after pointing out that early Americans were settlers and not migrants, someone mentioned that we were aggressive colonizers who killed the original inhabitants. "Oh, how dare you paint the settlers with a broad brush," he cried. "They were brave settlers who had to deal with an aggressive and violent group of savages." He is doing the exact thing he was upset with her doing. But in the world of right-wing rhetoric, the white are just, and everyone else is a godless creature who is not deserving of any success. So no, he was not just talking. He prioritized spectacle over education. He was a rabid click farmer, which is why we have all these lovely clips that conservatives claim we are taking out of context, when the truth is Charlie chose the context of those clips. And when you listen further, it only gets worse, because the full context is racism, but also wanting so badly to be the victim. It's a surprise that Tom MacDonald never asked him for a collab. Oh, but wait, He did manage to make a song in his honor. Fuck these guys and their white fragility. This desire to be the underdog and the victim in a society that largely benefits them, it's so laughable. And this is why I think it's safe to say that Charlie endorsed a lot of our current systemic problems. Because all of these clips are just him critiquing efforts to dismantle or sidestep them. He was never doing things the right way. He never engaged honestly. It was all for performance and spectacle. And speaking of performance, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the liberals who look at his death and go, "Wow, this really affected me because I'm a podcaster. This could happen to me." It just really tells you how white people who are not used to systemic injustice believe themselves to be the exception to the bad things that happen in this world. And it's why we need to stop wasting people's time with this empty platitude of being so quick to condemn political violence when we're not even brave enough to upset the status quo. This is why the Democrat Party is losing support. They keep shifting right on issues in an attempt to not anger or upset the delicate balance we have between the two establishment parties. It's just a bunch of performers playing political theater. They are no different from the weirdos who go on TV and spout the most insane nonsense for attention. And that's because they are intellectually dishonest about their goals. Change? Hardly. Progressive? They're progressive, all right. Progressively conservative. We need more voices that condemn actual, politically sanctioned violence. This whole violence is always bad shtick is fine and all, but it is largely a moot point. Violence happens every day to people just trying to live their lives. ICE agents abducting people for looking a shade darker than paper white is a form of violence. A form of violence that is propped up by our government, making it, you guessed it, politically sanctioned violence. So when does it end? This is just lukewarm hand-washing at this point. Saying what's expected of you to say so that you can move on and still look respectable. And to keep up the act, you chastise everyone currently affected by forms of political violence for celebrating, being relieved, or showing apathy towards this man's death. I saw a quote that really says it best. Kindness to cruelty is just cruelty to the kind. The kindest thing we can really do is move on and stomp out all the bullshit. Call it what it is. A grift. You know the only person who actually grieved this man's death? Candace Owens. Yeah. The irony is not lost on me, but even this dude's wife is just pulling his strings from the grave. How messed up is that? Really stop and think about that for a second here. If the president himself couldn't give a shit about him, and his own wife is just using him as a prop, why should anyone else be expected to show him sympathy? Every time I see a liberal representative do this little call to condemn violence, it just reminds me of that scene from Arcane.
We're done here.
We haven't even scratched the surface.
Do you not understand? I am part of this now.
You've always been a part of this. You just never had to look it in the eye. One dead kid? There's hundreds more where he came from, thanks to Silco and thanks to people like you who stuck their heads in the dirt.
This is over.
Not for me.
In my opinion, knowing what he stood for, what he perpetuated, the culture that he cultivated and fostered, and the lives he dismissed when faced with the consequences of that culture, he did deserve to die. He was the Lord Farquaad of school shootings, not a significant loss of life. Let conservatives have the problem of grieving his death. Lastly, it is very easy to condemn the gun violence responsible for his death when we all watched him die. But because political violence is often systemic, most people can shield themselves from acknowledging the harm that happens every day. These politicians are aware of the systemic violence happening. The fact that they do not fight against it makes every ounce of their condemnation of political violence full of dripping hypocrisy. Because if establishment Democrats really cared about political violence, they would do a lot more to fight against the effects that are invisible, instead of waiting for something tangible to take place to feign disgust at. We are going to die someday. The difference is when we do and how we get there. And I don't know about you, but I think everyone has the right to a boring, peaceful death after a life of normal, everyday problems. A world where we all exist in harmony. But if we can't have that, then I want the ones responsible for harming people just living their lives to be dealt with appropriately. No wishy-washy theater, real justice. Like the justice that is being denied each passing day for the brave women who held a press conference to talk about their experiences as victims of Epstein and his clients. Bring justice to them instead of trying to fabricate more lies about trans people and migrants.